then the emperor shows up and he's like, wow, the emperor's a god. The emperor's obviously a god. And the emperor's like, what part of secular imperium don't people
I
understand?
keep telling
Stop
you guys
worshiping
not to be
me.
religious.
And then they worship me.
Drawk show.
Welcome everybody to the second ever Drawk show. So we're going to be doing a different kind of segment that we're going to be doing a lot of, which is basically talking to someone about something while drawing art about it. So, do you want to introduce ourselves as our guest?
All right. I'm Sean. I am, mid-20s, typical sort of set of nerdy interests, I suppose. I'd probably say my favorite franchises stands probably Warhammer and Warhammer 40K.
Fair.
How long have I known you? 2 years?
I think 2
Three?
years?
Yeah, 2 years sounds right.
It sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been playing like tabletop games for quite some time. Like, I think we both, funny enough, well, not so much these days, but we both used to fall into very much perma DM.
Yeah.
Me less so now.
I think neither of us do that now because of each other, but I think both of us wore that for our respective groups before we met.
I mean, I remember the fact that I have like 4 years of experience DMing Pathfinder First Edition, but I think I played for all of like maybe 10 sessions in total across a few different games.
I think I am in the same boat, but I might have actually... I didn't run quite as much Pathfinder 1 because I stuck with 3.5 for a lot longer. But I think I might have played a similar amount of 3.5 in Pathfinder 1.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right. In terms of job, I'm a master's student, so basically I'm a research assistant, working on solar tech. My academic background is a mixture of history and chemistry, so that's a little bit unique, I suppose. Double major.
Yeah. Cool mix.
Yeah. In terms of what we are going to be talking about, like I believe that the core of this sort of hangout is talking about new changes in 40K lore, and I'm going to give my sort of raw, not very well researched opinion. I mean, I've read a fair bit about like the new stuff, and some of it's really good. Some of it, I have my issues with it, but that's going to be any franchise you actually invest that much time into. You're going to have strong opinions.
So where I'm at with 40K is I am new to it, but have researched it fervently enough that if it were almost any other franchise, I'd be basically an expert by this point, and instead I know very little.
Oh yeah, how much of the Horus Heresy have you gone through? Because the Horus Heresy is almost its own thing at this point.
I know like the outlines. I know their. I know the son done talked to a demon, and he was like, "Hey, what if your dad was bad?" And he was like, "Guess I got to kill the galaxy."
Oh, it's quite something. I mean, like if you want my opinion on like the conversion of Lorgar and Horus, I have long-winded opinions on it.
Oh God, let's talk about the new stuff.
Yeah. Right, yeah, that's probably for the best.
Let's go into Horus another day, because I am down to do a bunch of this, because I do actually love 40K lore. I think as a setting, I actually like fantasy a little bit more, but I think the lore is less fun to talk about, because it's a lot more concrete. Like, 40K being like, I don't know, warp bullshit, and making everything vague all the time, makes it really fun to talk about.
I mean, the thing is, 40K as a setting is so expansive and so diverse in terms of what you can tell stories about.
Yeah.
And fantasy has a bit of that, but at the end of the day, you are still looking at the Renaissance world. Yeah, and in terms of things that are actually like well established in the lore, I mean, they're doing a lot more now with the new books for fourth edition RPG. But prior to that,
fantasy roleplay is expanding a lot. They've been given a lot of leeway.
Oh man, Sea of Claws, really good book. Would recommend. I think I sent you my copy, my PDF copy.
I think so. I haven't read it yet, but yeah, you can definitely feel like I don't think Old World. I don't know if you could say Old World was planned that long ago, because they either that or they've given a lot of information to the people making fantasy roleplay, because they've just been making fucking calls with saying stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, I really like them bringing back the Norse dwarves, but that's not what this is supposed to be about.
We'll talk about Norse dwarves another day.
I mean, yeah. I mean, again, long list of things we could talk about, particularly even just within, Warhammer 40K. But yeah, so new lore, Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
I'm going to start this off with just my opinion, because I think that will set up frankly, my biases on everything that'll speak about after, is I think the new 40K stuff is a better story, but a worse setting.
Oh.
I don't actually like them moving forward the meta plot in terms of how it has affected the overall setting. I liked the Imperium as a crumbling Leviathan. And I think bringing back Gilliman, even with Imperium Nihilus, even with half the galaxy being sort of cut off, I think they made the Imperium come back too strong, too quick. But at the same time, the story of the Avenging Son of like Gilliman, his whole sort of plot line is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know a bit about that. It does feel like the Imperium was given kind of its darkest days moment, and now is kind of in the only resurgence it's really had in the history of like publication.
Yeah, like there was very briefly talked about resurgence of post Age of Apostasy, like Goj Van Dyer, not Goj. No, it was Goj Van Dyer. Yeah, right.
But was that taking place like actively as canon during publication, or is that like a
past event? There was a decent bit of stuff, like there's decent stuff of background with like the Sisters of Battle backstory, a decent chunk of stuff on like the Thorian Reformation, and that was actually like a bit of a plot line that was being worked on. But there was a bit of a resurgence post that, like the Goj Van Dyer days and the Age of Apostasy, the Reign of Blood, that was it. I think it was called the Reign of Blood. I might be mixing that up with a different Reign of Blood, but that was
sometimes it's gonna be a regular event.
Yeah, that was kind of the Imperium's darkest days, but for the most part, the thing is, and there was kind of the resurgence post that with like I think it's called the Age of Reckoning or Age of Vengeance, and then that goes into the waning years, which is what most people think of as the 40K setting, is the waning years. We expended all these resources with this sort of grand, almost acts of penance for a weakness during the Age of Apostasy, and it turns out we actually exhausted so much of what we had left.
Yeah,
and that was what the Imperium was we had our last sort of grand push back against the darkness. We overexerted, and now we are screwed. All right, I should ask this. What's your stance on cussing?
Okay. I think for when these get posted to YouTube, you don't want to curse at the very beginning because that demonetizes you. As far as Twitch goes, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to curse. You just can't say a slur.
Got it.
So no racy language, but some cursing. That's
all right. All right.
Hey, are we out of the first couple minutes? Let's give it a couple minutes more, then we can curse.
All right. So new lore. I think okay, so wait, give me sort of your background to this. Yeah, like so, how much of the new lore do you know?
I'm gonna say my background. I'm also gonna give a bit of context for viewers who might not know as much. So what I know is that 40K is meant to be a story about a crumbling empire. There was a cool emperor who's the best of us, super psychic guy, took over the galaxy. Great. His son tried to kill him. Oh no, now he's a skeleton on magical life support, sitting in a big chair, acting as a god for the galaxy. And the current lore is basically they've made big changes for the first time in a long time, and they were like, okay, so what's going to happen is demons are going to split the galaxy in half with a big rip. So there's a Grand Canyon of death magic in the middle of the galaxy, splitting it in half, and everyone was like, okay, so I guess we're watching the death of the Imperium now. And then one of Magic Skeleton's sons has returned from the dead because of an elf god, and now he's helping make things good again.
Belisarius Call. Don't forget Call.
Yeah, the super scientist is now making better Space Marines that aren't as flawed.
Yeah. And the thing is, like going through a bit of his backstory, like more and more, like both in stories where he shows up and also stories that are about him. I've kind of come around to Call, where it's like, okay, this was a bit of an ass pull, but but it's not as bad now that they've actually gone back and built him up a little bit more.
There's also the fact that like a lot of the complaints I heard about the Primaris, which are Space Marines but better, they don't have the same problems. A lot of the complaints I've heard is that no one should be able to do stuff better than the Emperor, and a couple things that the Emperor failed a lot, like.
Yeah.
A lot of his things have fallen apart in ways that were not his intention. But then also, like, Belisarius Cawl has been working on this for a long time, and the Emperor kind of threw together Space Marines on a crack bender with a geneticist lady in a basement.
Yeah.
Like, not that simple, obviously. It's overstated, but...
And some of, like, the best Dark Age tech that he still had hanging around, but it's kind of implied that a lot of that was transferred to Cawl. So...
Yeah, he had access to a lot of the same stuff.
And Cawl is not a person. Like, he's not a person anymore. I mean, he was just a pretty, like, forward-thinking tech priest at the start, but the degree of self-modification he goes through is, like, even just in his Horus Heresy sort of period, is insane. And it really shows that, like, the mechanic is kind of pushing human limits, particularly the ones that are more innovative. It's actually pretty cool. Like, the idea of a Mechanicus individual, like, bringing themselves to the point of being basically almost a crappy Primarch in terms of their intelligence and in terms of their physical capabilities and in terms of, like, that, but clunkier, kind of makes sense. Like, it's not
like janky and put together piecemeal instead of designed from God DNA.
Yeah. And that is, like, not in terms of physical attributes, but in terms of, like, intelligence, in terms of ability to look, like, be forward thinking, in terms of ability to intellectually adapt, in terms of ability to, like, command and control things, like his understanding of logistics, his understanding of war, not so much his understanding of politics. Cawl is actually operating on that level. Like, one issue that people had with kind of the Horus Heresy and now with the new lore is they really brought in a bunch of, like, grand heroes.
Okay.
And 40K always had grand heroes, don't get me wrong. But, truly, sorry.
Primarchs as Sons of the Emperor are kind of like the epitome of that, in a way.
But the Primarchs used to be a thing that, like, wasn't really brought up. Or, like, if it was brought up, it would be a demon prime, because those are obviously still around.
Yeah.
So, like, you had Angron running around on Armageddon during the first war for Armageddon. But beyond that, Primarchs, particularly loyalist ones, weren't really, like, a thing. They were something that was in the background as these larger-than-life heroes, and now they're, like, characters. They're actual characters running around doing stuff. And you do start to run into the issue of, like, you're trying to write a character that is more intelligent than you could ever be, than a human being could ever be.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to keep in the background, because you kind of end up falling into the all according to Keikaku mode, where it's just supernatural. Everything they want to happen happens because they're so smart.
And that was kind of also people, I say people, but, like, a few people I've talked to have made the comment of, like, the Horus Heresy kind of ruined the Emperor because they make him just a pretty smart guy who occasionally does things that are inexplicable because the plot demands it. He becomes a kind of a plot device more than a character, because that's kind of what he needs to be, because there's all these established bits of lore of he does this, and then, because, you know, he was always in the background. He was always in background lore of, like, the burning of Monarchia. That's old established lore, even though it makes, and now they actually need to write that and try to make it make sense. Or, like, his mistreatment of Angron, like, after Nuceria, where the problem is, it's just, it doesn't make sense. It's not, but that's written lore. It's established. He needs to do these things. And so now they're making him a character, and the way they've kind of done that is to make him a very inconsistent, kind of all over the place character, and every single writer has a different interpretation of his personality, of his actual, like, true motives.
Yeah.
And if you take, again, obviously, if you take these stories as just legends, then it still kind of works, but it leads to some, like, if you're going from one book to another, it's just, like, this character's totally different.
And it's easy to write something off as legends when it's a story told in a novel by a character. Yeah. When it's a novel, it's more difficult just for the human brain. Like, you could just tell your reader this is a legend or build a framing device or whatever, but, like, people are still going to struggle to separate it from this is authorial intent, this is true. That's an issue. So,
right.
On to so in general, like for the recent developments, are you thinking is it that sort of thing going into the Horus Heresy more, or is it like the recent changes that you're thinking is the better story, worse world?
Okay. The recent changes to the Imperium and to the layout of the galaxy is what I would call, again, it is a good story. A lot of the stories that are written in as sort of like the meta plot itself is really good because people don't. I mean, this is something I just kind of got accepted is that people don't like the meta plot of things keep getting worse. There is no hope. This is the final decline. There are moments of heroism here and there.
Yeah.
People don't really seem to like don't like that as a story. I mean, I'm a little weird. I actually do really enjoy that as an overarching story.
Yeah, something that people should know
But
about you for that opinion, though, is that you are the type of person that whenever you are getting terrible luck in a game and complaining, you're like, wow, what fun I'm having.
yeah, yeah, that's true. So I like the slowly getting beaten down as a meta plot, and there are moments of heroism. There are moments where things go well. There are individual like settings within the overarching setting that actually do recover and bounce back, but overall it's all doom and gloom. I actually enjoy that. I thought it was something very unique.
It is unique, I think, because I mean, there's a concept in horror, which is in horror and thrillers, when you're writing those, you want to basically have these moments of levity and moments of victory, so that your horror, your tension, your fear, that stuff's going to feel a little bit more intense. And 40K did this very interesting thing, I feel like, until recently, where there was so little of that positive addition that you kind of ended up, if those moments of levity make the moments of horror more intense and horrifying, being drowned in horror kind of inures you to it and makes you just able to enjoy stupid amounts of darkness.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I liked the stories where it has sort of an almost hopeful ending, and then they zoom out and they say, "Oh yeah, no, things went pretty damn well for these heroes, these characters, this planet." But then you zoom out and it's like, "Yeah, but the rest of the sector burned." And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the yeah, no, this specific like subplot, if you will, in the meta plot of the universe has a happy ending. But
Yeah.
this universe can't. I liked the idea of the Imperium as something that is, in a sense, drowned in horror, but that is very unique. Like, if the Imperium has hope, is it still the Imperium as it was, at least in like third, fourth edition? And the answer is not really, at least
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, because these are now people who have a chance to survive, not people who
Yeah.
are sailing towards death.
This is no longer moments of brightness within a last stand. Like the Imperium as a whole actually has a damn good fighting chance. I mean,
Yeah.
you have legions of Space Marines active in the galaxy. And sometimes I feel that cheapens things. Like, do you know much about the Devastation of Baal plotline?
Oh, barely. I know that
Okay.
them Blood Angels are real mad.
I mean, they are real mad. That's true. But so pretty much all the Blood Angels are defined by the twin curse of the Red Thirst and the Black Rage.
Okay.
Red Thirst, they want to drink blood. Black Rage, they slowly go insane and essentially start reliving their Primarch's, their Gene Father's last moments as he's dying at the Siege of Terra, like fighting and dying at the Siege of Terra, like 10,000 years ago.
Fun when you inherit a guy's PTSD.
Yeah, pretty much. It is genetically induced PTSD. And pretty much, with a couple weird exceptions, everyone eventually falls to the Black Rage. And they just lose themselves in this sort of crushing, all-consuming rage and despair. They genuinely think that they are fighting the traitors at the final battle of the Horus Heresy. And having that be something that it is unavoidable. Like every Blood Angel successor chapter is on the decline, either due to battlefield casualties or due to the Black Rage, or both, usually.
Yeah.
And so you had like plot arcs with like Gabriel Seth, the chapter master of the Flesh Terrors, and his whole thing of, yeah, we keep falling to the Black Rage, we keep falling to the Red Thirst, we are considered the most savage of Sanguinius's sons. We are the most savage of the Blood Angel successors. And everyone kind of hates us. And they're not wrong. And him sort of slowly recovering their sort of the opinion of them on the galactic scale. Slowly redeeming the Flesh Terrors through all these sort of clever tactics of making sure that they never fight alongside or around civilians or mortals.
Yeah.
Of like, we rush in, we kill the enemy, and we drag ourselves out before we lose ourselves in the, well, almost joy of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because we almost cannot contain our bloodlust at any given moment, but we want to be heroes. And so they were these very tragic, again, heroic characters, because they were constantly losing more men due to them doing this. They were constantly losing themselves, like losing more members to the Black Rage. And it was a little bit like that. The Flesh Terrors were the most extreme, but it was like that for every single Blood Angel successor. Then the Devastation of Baal happens. And so the Devastation of Baal is the Tyranids, base bugs that eat everything, are heading towards the homeworld of the original Blood Angels Legion. This was their planet, the planet where their genetic father grew up on.
Right.
Yeah, I guess grew up on. That's where he landed. It's a whole thing. I don't know how much knowledge you want to assume.
For now. It's his home planet.
Yeah, it's his home planet. And this is their sort of sacred, holy home world for all Blood Angel successors. And so Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, calls back every single successor chapter, like even ones that have kind of gone renegade and are kind of at the edge of outright treason against the Imperium, to defend Baal. And they do. And like they answer in vast numbers beyond even his expectations. And it's all the stuff about them, we are going to unleash everything we have. There is no point in holding back. We are going to defend our home world even if it kills us. Mm-hmm. And they die in droves. I think there's 21,000 Space Marines at the start, which, considering the fact that a chapter, which is a significant military force, is 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth noting, because I think a lot of people think of Space Marines, and if you're not familiar with 40K, you kind of think of like someone
Starcraft.
Who is a well-trained soldier in power armor, and Space Marines are like wildly genetically mutated freaks who are crazy super soldiers, like super soldiers beyond what most fiction will make their super soldiers, because the threats in Warhammer are that fucking intense that Space Marines can still die in droves despite being that insane.
Yeah, because like the Tyranids, the space bugs are coming at them with, I think they're coming in their billions. Like that's just it. Like this is like comically outnumbered. If you think of them more like, frankly, in a way, almost like Marvel superheroes.
Yeah.
Like not quite that extreme. They're not quite that supernatural usually, but in terms of their capabilities.
Some of them do have rune magic.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah. The runes.
Like, the only reason Master Chief would win a fight with a Space Marine is because he has an energy shield.
Yeah.
It's basically cheating.
Yeah. So yeah, if you think of them that way, 21,000 is this absurd force. Mm-hmm. They also draft literally the entire population of the inhabited moons of Baal. And pretty much, I think it's like everyone over the age of 12 is you're military. Because they can only actually evacuate the children. Anyways. Sorry.
What else are you going to do when space bugs who want to eat everything are coming to your planet?
Yeah. And so it's this heroic last stand. They're fighting in the fortress that like they haven't had to really use in literally millennia. They're neophytes, like the people who are being turned into Space Marines are like destroyed. Their gene seed, which they use to make more Space Marines, is destroyed. The future is dead. This is it. The tragedy has come to its grand climax. Everyone is going to die.
Yep.
Like, if there are survivors, it'll be in the hundreds. They will probably never rebuild from this. Because they have, like, groups that they sent out with some stockers of gene seeds, so that way their entire legion will not be wiped out even if they lose.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, that's literally thinking, like, in 2,000 years, we might be able to rebuild.
Yeah.
2,000 years of constant effort and constant conservation of our resources, we might be able to rebuild. And so, and this is final grand battle. The sort of trough of death magic stretches across the sky because that's happening at the same time. The Tyranids are like wiping them out. They finally say, okay, screw it. All is lost. Let's give in to the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Let's lose our sanity, sacrifice our dignity and our sanity in this final fight. And they do. And basically there's like a few hundred of them left in this as they sort of rip and tear through the Tyranids. They manage to kill the Tyranid commander. And then when Dante basically comes to, Gilliman's there. And he's like, hey, so I know that this is supposed to be like your final stand, but I brought a bunch of Space Marines that I made from your Primaris gene seed without telling you. Also, they're like way more resistant to the Black Rage, and yeah, you're just fine now. All you guys are just fine now.
Yeah.
And it's such a gut punch because it's like, oh, so this all like they don't quite go so far as to say this all meant nothing.
Yeah.
But this was meant to be the climax of the story, and the climax is, and you're all good.
That one, it's a bit difficult. It feels like a lot is taken. I feel like the Primaris in general is a weird situation because they kind of did it in a way to make Gilliman as much of a good guy as possible. And I think...
Yeah.
I like good guys...
quote unquote.
Yeah, I like good guys in 40K when it feels like they are well-intentioned, but will still, like, not be perfect. Because the implication of the Primaris really feels like, no, he's right. It's good, and maybe they're going to pull the rug out, and suddenly the Primaris are all going to be super corruptible or something, and there's some sort of reveal. But it feels like that's not likely. And when I think of like what would make sense for the Primaris to make it like a thing that's clearly well-intentioned, but you can see as a mistake, or you can see why people are angry or resistant more, and not just be like, why don't you just listen to Daddy G? Is if he could only make Ultramarines because of his because he only has access to his gene seed. He's a Primaris, by the way, everybody. He's the son of the Emperor. That's why Space Marines are built from the sons of the Emperor. Primarch, sorry. He's a Primarch. Space Marines are built from the DNA of the Primarchs. That's how they work. But
that's why they're called the Gene Father for the various legions, yeah.
And I feel like that would make so much sense if not for the fact that the Primaris were largely introduced to upgrade Space Marine armies to be able to fight with the power creep in the war game, and a lot of people
and sell new models.
But a lot of people's existing armies, like, they're not gonna want to add in a bunch of Ultramarines to be lore accurate just to have access to these new units.
And there is a little bit of like that sort of comment of Gabriel Seth, the chapter master of the Flesh Terrors, says, "Oh, these are not Blood Angels. These are Ultramarines in red paint."
Mm-hmm. Which
these are yours.
At least they do that. Like,
yeah. And okay. If you want to talk about like fallible heroes in 40K, you're gonna like the next section because I want to talk about the Godblight trilogy, the Plague Wars trilogy.
That I don't know if I know anything about.
Okay, so it's kind of I would say it is the most in-depth sort of look at Gilliman and what he's doing since, I guess, the Gathering Storm trilogy, which was where he was, reintroduced. It was like, yeah, he's alive. But Godblight is the book, the Plague Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
Is about him fighting against his corrupted brother, Mortarion. But what it's really about is Gilliman basically being constantly told, you're a god, and you need to admit that. Accept the fact that you are the new God King and have absolute authority. Oh, and that is how everyone sees you. Hello?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm there.
Did crash. Okay. And you need to accept that. And it doesn't matter if you like it, you're in charge. And him being like hemming and hawing over this of like, I don't actually want to accept this massive amount of authority. I don't want to accept the fact that people are worshiping me, but I'm too much of a pragmatist to say no.
Oh.
Because Gilliman, at his best, when he's at his best writing, he is the reluctant tyrant. He is going down the same path that the Emperor accidentally went down, and he is hating every second of it.
I do like that.
Like, honestly, sorry.
I was just going to say, and that's sort of the thing that you were talking about, where, like, the writing and the characters are still like very good.
No, the story. Okay, so just to give you, the three stories I want to talk about that kind of come up with the Ultramarines a lot and with Gilliman is Marnius Calgar, I guess still technically the chapter master of the Ultramarines.
Yeah.
Cato Sicarius, and Gilliman. Those three characters,
okay,
like some of the best writing.
Marnius Calgar is the guy who punch real good, right?
Yes, and he is, he's the brilliant master commander of the Ultramarines. He's one of the most respected characters of all time, and now he's met his father, and he has crippling daddy issues.
Oh, poor guy.
Because he is nothing compared to Gilliman. He is a pale shadow compared to Gilliman, and he is used to thinking of himself as the great hero. And now he's met something that he can never, ever match up to. And it's fantastic. And he always
chaos juice.
Oh yeah, he's always assuming Gilliman is judging him. In every scene where they're interacting, he always feels he's fallen short. He always feels judged, and it's everything you see from his perspective is so good because it's like, no, that makes sense. Like, this is his hell. Like, this should be a moment of absolute joy for him, but instead it's just crippling doubt.
That's very fun. I like that.
And Cato Sicarius, I think he was the captain of the second company of Ultramarines. So Cato Sicarius was for the longest time a goddamn joke because he was kind of one of those meme characters that's like, yeah, he's tough. He's so good with the sword. He's a master swordsman. He's definitely going to take after Marnius Calgar. He's always like having a good time. He's way too perfect, and everyone kind of hates him for that, or at least a lot of people hated him for that. And the only times he's actually an enjoyable character is when he's funny. Like, there's a scene where there's this Tau, I think, Watercast character who, like, is this whole complex character in her own right. And Cato Sicarius is in a fight against the Tau, like, Taus are Xenos, so, death to Xenos.
The Imperium
he's
doesn't
bearing down on her. Yep. And she says something along the lines of, like, you worship your warrior king, Gilliman. Would he be proud of you slaughtering an unarmed woman, like unarmed female? And Cato Sicarius, like, basically just runs her over, stomps her head down, and thinks to himself, yes, he would be. And then keeps killing.
Oh my god.
And it's so good, because, like, no, that's such a, like, imperial thing of, like, we worship these honorable lords, but at the same time, I mean, we're xenocidal monsters. Like, civilian military doesn't matter. We need to kill them all anyways.
Suffer not this Xeno.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta kill him.
And so, just him, like, no moment of doubt, just stomps her head and just goes, yeah, no, he would be proud. Thanks for bringing him up. And so,
it's made me feel
that was his character.
That you brought up my dad.
And so that was his character, just way too cocky, way too self-assured, and, always wins every fight he's in, never seems to really struggle, like, has plot armor out the ass, like, over-the-top plot armor, because a big part of this was with Matt Ward, who is an Ultramarines fanboy, but that's got its own thing. And then in the new Imperial, like the new Gathering Storm, I guess, the Gilliman Imperium, I'll say, the new lore.
Yeah.
He's a broken survivor.
Oh.
Because things went poorly. Like, he finally had to face up to things he couldn't fight. He can't fight fundamental aspects of reality. He can't fight the warp. You can't out-sword fight physics, basically, or the fundamentals of magic overcoming you.
Yeah.
And so he's watched like dozens of his brothers die while he can do nothing but sit there helplessly. He actually spent some time as basically a prisoner of war. And he is bitter. And so, again, he's a broken survivor. That's what I want to call him. And so them just taking this character who is defined by being cocksure and then just bam. It's so good because it gives his character some actual depth. And it's the same thing with Calgar. They gave him some actual real depth with this making him, almost resentful of Gilliman. And it's like, again, Gilliman at his worst is when he's the golden boy, but he's at his best when he's the reluctant tyrant. The I don't want to hoard the powers of tyranny for myself, but I will. And I have to. I cannot trust anyone. Like after the Horus Heresy, I know I can't trust anyone. So I need to have the potential power to overwhelm and wipe out anyone. I need to hoard this authority to myself. Not because I want to, but because I can't run the risk of someone else basically pulling a Horus.
Yeah, I like that a lot, as it does feel like they put a lot of work into the characters to make them feel like a lot more fleshed out. It's so interesting to hear, because what I'm hearing a lot of from the deep lore 40k fans right now is how much the characters are feeling fleshed out and fully realized and interesting in the current setting stuff, and how much less real and full the characters are feeling in Horus Heresy stuff.
Okay. So, do you want to? Okay.
Yeah. No,
Horus Heresy.
Let's get into it.
When it comes to the Primarchs, when it comes to actually so many different characters, they have this issue where the son character, like the character who's the son of who's supposed to be the focus of this, is just a better version of them, a more interesting version of them. Like Karn the Betrayer, World Eater, he is what Angron should have been.
Okay.
He's still somewhat sympathetic, even though he's this violent monster.
Right.
He still has this sense of honor to him. The sense of, like, we are right to rebel because, like, the Emperor is a tyrant. Because, well, he is. Whereas Angron he's just the worst. And again, he's an okay character when he's kind of funny, but he's, at this point, just a demon of Khorne, and he has no personality. Beyond blood, skulls, blah, blah, blah.
Blood for the blood god, skulls for the throne of skulls, and that's all he needs.
Exactly. So Angron is this very flat character, whereas they gave all the depth, all the sort of interesting stuff to Karn, which is kind of a weird move, and it's the same thing with Argel Tal, who's a word bearer, and his Primarch, his father, Lorgar. Lorgar is, because they make Argel Tal a resentful servant of something he knows is evil.
Okay, so who's this guy? I don't know this guy.
Okay, so Argel Tal is... Yeah, okay, fair enough. Argel Tal is a word bearer. I think he was the, most... Okay, so should I start with the Primarchs?
Yeah, start from the Primarch, go down, and let's go down.
Right. So Lorgar is the Primarch of the word bearers. His entire plot line is, I grew up in a world that was deeply religious. I was very mistreated. I eventually took over the world. My adoptive father is comically evil and just a real terrible person who's been manipulating me and is obviously manipulating me. And then the emperor shows up and he's like, wow, the emperor's a god. The emperor's obviously a god. And the emperor's like, what part of secular imperium don't people understand? Stop worshiping me.
To be religious.
And then they worship me. And so Lorgar went, yeah, not a god, Dad. Right, wink, wink.
Hey, bud, no, stop that. No, stop. This isn't a joke.
Yeah, and so Lorgar's primary sort of plot arc is keeps insisting the Emperor to his face, you're a god and you need to fess up to that. And the Emperor goes, no. And Lorgar goes, right, sure, wink, no, got it, and then leaves. And he does that a couple times. And he's put in charge of the Word Bearers Legion, which are made from his genetics. They're humans who are implanted with his genetics to make them his Space Marines, his Legion. And so they're ripping across the galaxy, and they keep insisting to the population that, no, the Emperor is a god, and he wants you to worship him. And the Emperor eventually finds out about this because galactic distances are absurd.
Yeah, and the way people communicate in 40k, because
right.
You can't travel faster than light in that universe. They basically use the psychic people's dreams.
Yep. It is basically dream speak.
And it's, they do the best they can. And oftentimes that is not great.
Yeah, and so the Emperor pretty much realizes, hey, the Word Bearers, Lorgar's sons, Lorgar's Legion, seemed to be really slow at conquering planets during the Great Crusade, which is the Emperor's big push to bring all of humanity into one big, very, very unhappy family.
Yeah.
One big abusive
because he
family.
Went, I'm as dictators are often to do, he went, I'm very smart and good. So clearly everyone would be happy if I made all the choices.
And he's kind of right,
he's
and that's what makes him
wrong than most dictators.
Exactly. He genuinely is acting for the betterment of the species. Just doesn't give a damn about any given individual.
Yeah. He really loves humanity. He just doesn't give a shit about humans.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. And so he's also...
This is the Emperor we're talking about. Keeping track.
Yeah. The Emperor also just... He really... I mean, he lived through the breakdown of society into such total anarchy that like cannibalism, warlordism just became normal.
It's also worth noting, a thing that I find very funny about him is he's existed for thousands of years. So he is perpetual. And he was kind of just waiting around like, okay, the second humanity needs me, like the second they can't do it themselves, I'm going to step in and fix it. And then he's watching, and there's this brief moment in the Warhammer 40k universe where like things are going all right, and humans are becoming peaceful and like not conquering, but expanding across the galaxy, and like generally doing a pretty good job, and still fighting, but way less so than they ever have. And there's a moment for him where he's like, maybe things are gonna be okay, and I was being paranoid.
Yeah, and then the Age of Strife.
Yeah, everything gets bad.
There's about 2,000 years of just total breakdown of galactic society. So many human worlds just are wiped out. AI turns against humanity. There's just psychers going everywhere.
Against humanity, we got to learn our lesson.
Hey! That was the first time that happened in this setting. Though it is kind of funny enough implied that when the Great Crusade is happening, the Space Marines keep finding civilizations that were destroyed by their own AI. Which means that, like, humanity during the Golden Age should have been going out with their AI and continually finding alien races that were wiped out by their own AI. And apparently we're like, damn, they must have been bad at it.
Yeah, they just didn't do it right.
I mean, you know, it's really easy to believe in your own exceptionalism.
Yeah. I mean, look, that is the entire core belief of most patriotism is, but we're built different.
Yeah. And sometimes they're right.
Sometimes they are.
And sometimes they're really, really wrong.
I would say more often than not.
Yeah.
Rarely are people built different.
So anyways, going back, Lorgar. Lorgar basically keeps going to the Emperor and saying, you're a god. The Emperor says, no. And Lorgar's like, got it. No. Wink, wink.
Wink, wink, wink.
And so he's going out. He's converting huge quantities of people to worship of the Emperor, which is illegal in the Empire. And in fact, organized religion. I mean, the Emperor has burned people alive for less.
Yeah. There's an entire short story all about him needing to personally interrogate the last priest on Earth before burning down his church.
Yep.
Just to prove a point.
Yeah. Because, you know, the Emperor, he knows he's right.
Yeah.
And he's oddly spiteful about that fact. He's like, why don't you guys get it?
God is dumb and I'm right and you should listen. He's basically if you gave Reddit atheists absolute power.
At his worst, 100%, yeah. And so Lorgar is like, yeah, I'm going to worship the Emperor. And then the Emperor finally, like, kind of wakes up to the fact that, no, Lorgar is still worshiping him, goes to his perfect city, which is perfect because everyone worships the Emperor with utter faith. And has the Ultramarines basically combat drop in, the Ultramarines under Gilliman.
Yeah. And
just march the entire population out at basically gunpoint without explaining anything. Ends up massacring like half the population because, well, they didn't obey laws they didn't know existed. And now there's people with guns pointed at them and they're going to try to fight back just out of panic.
Yeah.
They don't understand what the hell's going on.
It's definitely not their fault that they were committing what the Emperor saw as a grievous crime. They were told, hey, there's this Emperor guy. He loves being worshipped as a god. It's his favorite thing. He's a god, by the way. Big deal. Definitely worship him. That's what he wants.
And so Lorgar comes back, and it's like, "What did you do to my city?" And then finally, and then the Emperor basically has the entire legion of Lorgar kneel in the ashes of Monarchia, and utterly humiliates him while praising Gilliman. And the thing is, he never explains why he does this. Okay, yeah, sorry. The Emperor has to do things that are, background described stuff, and this is an example of the Emperor having to be an idiot. Because Monarchia, in the full context that they give in the Horus Heresy, makes no goddamn sense. But anyways, that's its own thing. But yeah, so Lorgar is utterly humiliated. His god came to him, burned his city, killed his priests, and said, "No, I am not a god. You cannot worship me." And Lorgar, basically, after licking his wounds and talking to his abusive adoptive father, as opposed to his abusive actual father, the Emperor,
yeah,
and pretty much goes, "Right, the Emperor is a god, right? But he's a shitty god because he won't let us worship him. We need to find better gods." And so they find the Chaos Gods, who are entities of malice incarnate.
Pure evil.
Pure excess of something.
Well, yeah. Like a concept boiled down to its nth, which is usually just means pure destruction and bad.
Yeah. Because, again, the Chaos Gods are pure... They are a pure primal concept. So Slaanesh is pleasure, Khorne is blood and violence and rage. Tzeentch is change. Nurgle is life, despair, inevitability, entropy.
Yep. They have diverse portfolios, but they all follow a theme.
Well, except Khorne.
Khorne doesn't have a diverse portfolio. He is just blood for the blood god. That's what he's got going for him.
He doesn't like magic, and he doesn't like ranged combat. That's about what you got.
Yeah.
And so Lorgar basically takes his legion on a grand pilgrimage, finds his gods, and the gods are like, "Yeah, we're going to torture the crap out of you and everyone you love, and then humanity. And also, we are power incarnate, and you need us." And Lorgar basically goes, "Yep, okay. I see nothing wrong with this. This is the truth. This is the fundamental truth of the universe, and the truth must be followed and must be obeyed."
Like a good deal to me.
Pretty much. And so, sorry.
I think Horus Heresy stuff runs into the issue of like prequel syndrome in general, where things were described as having happened, and you can just go, yeah, it made sense. There was a good reason for it, and you're like, wow, this sounds so crazy and insane, but I guess there was a good reason for it. And then it's another writer's job to go, what was the good reason that this happened?
And then they can't, because what happened didn't make a ton of sense, and they needed a really good reason. Yeah, exactly. And so, that's basically what happens with Lorgar. I mean, one take on Lorgar that I do kind of like is he psychologically needs something above him. He cannot handle himself. Yeah. He needs something to almost blame.
For reality, the way it is.
Almost, he needs something to blame for his own bad actions.
Oh, shit.
Because Lorgar will never choose to do the right thing. Lorgar has no problem. I mean, on his home planet, he ends up killing like a third of the population in a holy war that never needed to happen.
My man, shit.
And then as soon as the Emperor comes down and says, "Yeah, I'm not a god," he's like, "Yep, you're a god. I'm going to massacre in your name. I will burn libraries. I will burn people. I have no problem with this because it is in your name, and you are responsible morally. I just get to do what I want. I mean, not what I want. I mean, totally not what I want."
Oh, no.
And so when he finds the Chaos Gods, and he's like, "Yeah, they're terrible. They're awful, and I need to worship them." It makes sense. He needs something above him that he can blame his own bad actions on. Like, that makes sense. That makes some sense.
So is he Chaos Undivided, like, just in general?
He is.
Yeah.
He is. Like, he considers himself the primary priest of the pantheon of the four Chaos Gods. And yeah, so that's Lorgar. Angron basically grew up as a slave on a really, really horrible world. Even though he was a Primarch, they had such advanced technology and such a numerical advantage on him that he couldn't really resist until he was grown. Because Primarchs they're demigods, frankly.
Yeah.
And so he ended up having nails put in his brain that constantly make him angry and constantly cause him pain unless he's acting out his anger.
Well, sounds like he's not as to blame for being a shit.
No, he's really not. I mean, whenever he actually has control over his actions, he generally does pretty good things, but he doesn't have control over his actions because he has screaming nails in his brain. Brain. Yeah. Just all the time. And it never stops. And he's in constant agony, and he's been abused and horrifically mistreated his entire existence. No. Angron wants to die, and now he's immortal. And he has never been more upset.
Oh, no. Poor lad.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Like, Angron is an object of pity. Because as much as he's an object of horror, as much as he's this violent monster, just feel bad for him because, like, every time he tries to do something, it's generally something that at least makes some moral sense. Like, he's forced to, like, when he first gets the nails put in, the reason why the nails are put in was because he wouldn't kill his adoptive father in a gladiatorial bout, because he was a gladiator. He was the king of the ring in the sort of gladiatorial blood sports that the horrifically oppressive nobles of this world put on to keep the population in line and have them distracted. And so he was the king of the ring, and he had this adoptive father that was this older gladiator. And then when he beats his father, he basically is like, no, I'm not going to kill him. Are you insane? So he killed...
The Emperor keeps being like, man, I made all these godchildren. I better let someone else raise them.
You know, they were taken away from him. They were literally stolen from him in his laboratory. Like, this wasn't something he chose. Okay. At least there's a theory that he let the Chaos Gods steal them from him, but that frankly makes no sense to me. Like, all the justification of, like, oh, he won an excuse to go out and conquer the galaxy. No, he was already planning to do that. He openly stated, I'm going to conquer the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, no, my children are missing.
That's what he came to Mars saying. If anyone doesn't know about Warhammer lore, I don't know how you're listening still. I'm not. This is a discussion. It's not an explanation. If you are here somehow in the future when this is a VOD, I'll let you. The Emperor went to Mars because there was a bunch of engineers on Mars and he needed their help to conquer the galaxy.
And the engineers worship technology and definitely don't really understand it that well. But they're really good at replicating what they do have.
Yeah, and they joined up because they were like, well, you know the prophecy we have about a machine god, you know, a robot god. This guy in armor is probably robot god.
I mean, he did perfectly fulfill the prophecy. Crazy how that happened. Crazy. It's not like he could have read the prophecy and then done exactly what it says he should be doing. Crazy.
And never mind the fact that he hates gods and isn't a machine.
Yep, I am not a god and I'm not a machine, but I am your machine. I'm not going to deny that I'm the machine, the Omnissiah, the manifestation of your machine god.
You're allowed to have religion, and you can call me the machine god. Lorgar looks at that happens and goes, I bet I can also, because they can.
Yeah. Anyway, so Angron, basically, him and his gladiators bust out. They're rampaging across the planet, killing nobles, sacking cities, because this society is so bad that like violent revolt, like omnicidal violent revolt, is honestly an improvement. You know, and but they start to lose because they're fighting an entire goddamn planet. And they finally get pushed back to their mountain holdout. And they're Angron and his gladiators, who at this point he sees as his brothers and sisters in arms. He loves them.
Yeah.
Because deep down, he was supposed to be a good person.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, a good warrior. Like a decent warrior.
Yeah.
Like decent as in morally decent.
Like not an absolute shit.
Yeah. And so there they are. The entire planet's coming to kill them. They're sending their armies of slaves. And the Emperor shows up in orbit. And now you see, this is another example of the Emperor has to do something that doesn't make sense, because in the background, he kidnaps Angron against his will and lets the people he loves be slaughtered without him.
Yeah, good call, Biggie. That's going to make him love you.
Yeah, so the guy who was, again, fairly honorable, fairly decent person, was basically, like, despite the rage, despite the nails in his brain screaming at him, is actually still kind of a decent guy. He's you know, he has dug his grave in this place. Hey. He's ready to die alongside those he loves. And so the Emperor, instead of just dropping down and saving him, and thus earning his loyalty, or at the very least his respect, yeah,
You gotta
that's him get
be
slaughtered.
real confident as the slave gladiator owner to, after you kidnap a demigod child, go, all right, here's what we're gonna do next. Is we're gonna put nails in his brain that make him incredibly violent and angry, and nothing could go wrong with this plan.
I mean, they do. They make him more controllable because they make him more predictable.
I look, you can say that, but that's a plan built to backfire.
Yeah, yeah, and they kind of assumed that he wouldn't be able to like coordinate with the other gladiators once he had, screaming nails in his brains.
That's what
But that's
happens
exactly
when
what
you
he does
kidnap
because
a
he's still a
demigod.
Primarch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is don't kidnap demigods, and if you do, don't abuse them. And so the Emperor kidnaps his demigod son and abuses him, just tosses him into
That
like
guy did
'cause
not get the moral of the story. He has no media literacy.
so he basically just drops him into this basically into a hold, a cargo hold, and then says, I don't know, your legion, your sons can figure it out. And so his
What?
legion, his
No.
yeah,
Take the
yeah,
nails
no,
out, bud. Get a surgeon on this
can't.
guy.
He can't. He can't. It's basically like it's Dark Age tech. The Emperor doesn't even really understand it. He basically takes one look at it
It's
and says, "Nah, I
magic
can't."
nails, understand.
And now you see again. The smart thing would have been, okay, put him in stasis until you can take the nails out.
Yeah.
Until you figure something out. Let him be there as almost this symbol of I don't know,
Perseverance.
a perseverance. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah, let him be that to his legion if he can't be a commander.
Yeah, because they would have been
because
good
he
dudes,
can't
because
be
they
a
weren't
commander.
based off of the nails in the brain, although they probably would get magic PTSD, because that's how Warhammer works, but...
I mean, they were always kind of brutal, but I mean, what they were was himbo frat bros.
You know, there's worse things to be.
The Warhounds, which is what the World Eaters used to be called,
You know,
were like they were cool guys.
Actually, for himbo frat bros, if there's anything I've learned from women on Twitter, it's the best thing to be.
You know? And so that's what the Warhounds were like prior to Angron. Then Angron was like, eventually, after killing most of the command structure, Karn finally manages to talk to him while Angron is just beating the crap out of him, just pounding into him, destroying him, and Karn finally manages to get through and talk some sense into Angron. And so, yeah, it's I mean, it's a blood splattered cargo hold, but it is somehow one of the most wholesome scenes. And so Angron is like, yeah, I'll take command of my legion. Also, figure out how to make more of these nails so I can put them in all my sons' heads.
Oh, okay.
And so that happens. And they have a civil war over it, and a bunch of them die. And the Emperor says, hey, don't put nails in your sons' heads. And Angron says, I'm going to do that anyways.
You're not my real dad.
And because the central theme of the Horus Heresy is no one actually listens to the Emperor. He just writes his cool laws and no one does it.
It really seems like a lot of his story is the story of people being like, that's a cool concept, but I'm gonna not do that.
Yeah. And so Argel Tal, word bearer under Lorgar, is what Lorgar should have been. Because okay,
Argel Tal. We're jumping around. Who's this?
Right. Sorry. Argel Tal. Basically, I just want to do Lorgar Angron, and then do Argel Tal Karn. I know it's a lot of names. So Argel Tal, he's son of genetic son of Lorgar. He's a word bearer. Grew up on the world. Actually, wait. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he grew up on Lorgar's home planet. Basically, grew up worshiping the Emperor, worshiping Lorgar, and he becomes Lorgar's favorite son, his equerry, his best bud. Not in terms of the actual command structure of the Legion, even though he is pretty high rank, but he is kind of the go-to guy.
Yeah.
For Lorgar. And this is all pretty damn good. They're having a good time worshiping the Emperor, and then Lorgar basically gets told, no, the Emperor's not a god, and the Emperor does the whole thing with Monarchia, and kind of goes off the rails. And Argel Tal realizes he can't help but follow.
Oh.
He starts to realize just how strong the genetic conditioning is. He can't disobey Lorgar. He always makes the choices Lorgar would make, even when they're insane. and he knows it, and it
So
hurts
his
because he
situation,
keeps, yeah.
he starts to figure out like, one of the only ones to understand how little freedom that the Space Marines have.
Because Space Marines have restricted freedom. They are genetically programmed to want to obey their genetic fathers, but outside the word bearers, there's some freedom. There's some ability to disobey. The word bearers, their genetic, I guess, curse. The problem, I guess, quote unquote, problem they have with their gene seed is a need to obey their gene father. They can't help but want to worship Lorgar, even when they know he's wrong. Like, pretty much every legion that turns against the Emperor, they splinter. Like, sometimes, like, between like a third to half of them end up staying with the Emperor and staying loyal and then getting killed.
Yeah.
The word bearers, I mean, they turn on a dime.
And it's all of them.
Almost. There's a few here and there that are implied to have been wiped out. A few that actually managed to stay loyal to the Emperor, but it's rare. Because they offhandedly mention the word bearers having a second cleansing, which is to say they're killing the ones who still worship the Emperor.
Yeah.
Instead of the evil, malicious chaos gods. But Argol Tal, what makes him so good is he knows he's a slave. And like there's a scene where a demon says, "Yeah, your father, he doesn't really care about you. He gave me permission to torture you and to send you and your brothers to torture, pain, and death." And Argol Tal's like, I know he's like that.
He just does it, man. You don't need to brag. I get it.
Because that's just it. Like, Lorgar knows what he's serving is evil. Argol Tal, but he chooses to serve evil because, well, frankly, he's just kind of a bad person. Whereas Argol Tal, he's genetically conditioned to obey Lorgar, and despite that, he still has his free will. He still has these moments of, but do we have to be so nasty about it?
Oh, God, feel bad for that guy.
And it makes him such a good character. And what they could have done with Lorgar, if they really wanted to sort of continue with most of the story, continue with all the established plot beats, is had him go to the Chaos Gods and basically be enslaved.
Yeah.
And have him be the chafing believer. The person who has no choice but to obey these evil entities, and he knows they're evil, but he doesn't want to. But instead they do that kind of with Argol Tal, and it makes Argol Tal, again, a really good character.
Mm-hmm. But he kind of just ends up being the version of his Primarch who's a comprehensible and deep character.
Yes. And it's the same thing with Karn. Karn is the comprehensible, interesting version of Angron.
His dad
because Karn... Yep. But he chose to actually have the nails installed. When it came down to the Legion Civil War, where half of them were like, you want to put nails in our brain? That's insane. That is utterly insane. What is wrong with you? Mm-hmm. He sided with the ones who... He led the ones that wanted to put nails in their brain because he was willing to break himself to try to understand Angron.
Funny to have that kind of loyalty and end up with the name of the betrayer.
Yeah, because, Khorne. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows.
Yeah.
Because, again, Karn's fundamental, the core of his character, what makes him, why he does so much of what he does, is because he wants to be loyal to Angron. Mm-hmm. But Angron is just abusive and terrible every single step of the way. And at the same time, they're all falling to a god that doesn't care about loyalty, that can't care about loyalty, that deep down wants you to turn on those you love and kill them if there's no one else to kill.
It's interesting. I found that actually kind of neat about Khorne, that it is the dichotomy that his one good trait is honor, but it's only honor in how you kill. Like, that's it. That's the only honorable aspect, is like, don't cheat, don't sneak up on someone, don't use ranged weapons, don't use magic. Other than that, kill everyone, kill your friends and family. Loyalty isn't a part of honor to him. It's just how you kill.
Yeah.
Which, makes sense for a god of blood and violence, I suppose.
Yeah. And so that's Karn. Karn is a very interesting character. And continuing on with the theme of son characters who are what their fathers should have been that would have made their fathers interesting characters. Gilliman and the Emperor. Gilliman is the reluctant tyrant, and that's how the Emperor like should have been portrayed, at least in my opinion. So again, I'm sorry.
He's the only Primarch who ends up like kind of just well written.
Gilliman?
Yeah.
No. There's other really well written Primarchs. Honestly, I like Vulcan. I like Jagatai Khan.
Oh, okay. That's the motorcycle one, right?
Yeah, he is Mongols on bicycles.
Fun that they did that.
Yeah, it is. Again, the White Scars, Jagatai's Legion, are very interesting characters. And just this whole thing of we obey this totalitarian military state and we love freedom and art.
I mean, they have the freedom to choose to live in an authoritarian state.
I mean, well, their response is goodbye? Like they still obey the Empire, but they just kind of go out and scour the galaxy of vile threats and just do everything they can to never actually interact with the Empire.
Yeah, honestly,
and that's what they do during most of the Great Crusade.
Honestly, a good choice.
Yeah. And it's what makes the whole like it's what makes Jagatai staying loyal feel a little bit like almost odd, is because he doesn't like the Empire. He swore an oath to the Emperor and he resents it.
He just also dislikes chaos. The thing is,
yeah.
He has common sense. He can go, hey, I can disagree with the Emperor and still not want to like worship a slug man that's gonna fill me with disease. Like there's a middle ground here.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it makes him again a very interesting character, kind of like Vulcan. He's a good guy. Like the core of who Vulcan is as a character is he is the good guy. He is the one moral person in the entirety of 40K. He's a bro. He's great. And he's obeying someone who is a conqueror and a like breaker of worlds, and he is having to go out and conquer and kill entire cultures, and he's trying to be as nice about it as he can.
It's fun to try to do your genocides not nicely.
Hey. It's not, well, I guess it is technically genocide if you wipe out a culture. Yeah.
Look, it's just not the like insidious form of genocide where it's like secretive and we're going to make your cultural practices illegal and inaccessible. It's the more upfront genocide where
flamethrowers.
Your culture doesn't exist if you don't.
Yeah. And so Vulcan, again, they do get into that contradiction of he is a fundamentally good person. He would have been happy just staying at home, being a really cool, jacked blacksmith. He loves making stuff.
Damn,
but he has to go out
for a blacksmith.
Vulcan, yeah.
Named him after a god of blacksmiths.
I mean, Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard.
Yeah. 40K has some pretty on-the-nose names.
I mean, yeah.
What are Corvus, some of the other, like... Sorry, no, you do that first, then I'll ask the question.
No, ask the question. I'm curious now.
I was just going to ask what, like, some of the other, like, big new goings-ons are. Like, what are the... Or even smaller ones. Like, what's happening in the world of 40K right now?
So the Emperor... Sorry, not the Emperor. Gilliman has made the Historiators, whose entire thing is they want to secure information, and Gilliman has given them writ to basically do what they want. And they're in a shadow war with the Inquisition, who want to burn all this information. And so... They're raiding inquisitorial vaults. They are raising small armies and killing imperial servants who are trying to hide things.
Oh, so sort of like a more subtle civil war.
Yes, and I really like it. And like honestly, some of the best new stuff is people actually standing up to Gilliman, because it's not common. Mm-hmm. But there are bits of it. Like there's this one group of Black Templars who are essentially lost in a warp storm for a very extended period throughout all the sort of big plot changes. And then they come back out and a bunch of Custodies are like, we're the bodyguards of the Emperor. Gilliman now commands them.
Yeah.
And they basically show up and like, yeah, Primaris Space Marines. Here's what they are. Here's how to make them. And the Black Templars, who are religious zealots, say, "Oh, you're tampering with the holy work of the Emperor.
Yep.
I'm going to kill you."
Yeah, because there's been a lot of cases where someone takes the helm of the Imperium, and the true patriots who serve the Emperor's vision have needed to rise against them and restore the Imperium to the Emperor's vision. So, to them, coming back, they're like, oh, okay, another pretender has taken over the Imperium, and we're doing holy work by fixing that. Got it.
Yeah, because, it just makes sense that they would not tolerate this, because the Emperor's work is holy. The Space Marines are holy
to them,
and so any tampering, for that, any tampering of that was blasphemy.
Yep. Their standards are interesting because the Custodes directly commune with Mr. Skeleton. I know we said the Emperor is a skeleton in a chair. He's a psychic skeleton. He can talk to his special guard. And they have only started following Gilliman's orders directly and being more active because they've been told by the Emperor that that's the direction the Imperium is meant to go right now, and it has his approval. You'd think that someone would listen to the Custodes. Like, they've ended a lot of civil wars by saying, hey, we had a talk with the big guy. Here's what's up.
Yeah. But that's just it. Anyone can say they've been talking to God.
Yeah, but the Custodes are, like, known to do so a lot more than most people.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, a lot more than anyone, really.
Yeah.
At least, yeah. Anyways, I actually need to go use the restroom. I'll be back in a minute. Unless you want to cut it here. It has been a bit over an hour. I don't know how long you plan on this going.
I think I'm going to go for another 20 minutes, and then I'll be done this drawing.
All right, I'll be back in a minute.
I'll see you in a minute. All right, future YouTube VODs. There's going to be a lot going on between where you are and where I am. More chats will be done. I'll get a little bit better at this. Sound system will be set up. But if you are watching this in the future, is there any topic you'd want me to talk about that I haven't yet? I'm just throwing that out there, letting you guys answer. And I'm definitely willing to talk about basically anything. And actually, if you yourselves out there want to have a conversation about anything while I do a drawing about it, I have Discord open. There's going to be an invite right below this video here. If you jump in there, you can come on and basically pitch anything as your field of expertise or your passion. And I'm willing to have a conversation if it seems like it'd be a good time and work on a really fast drawing of it. Hopefully he's back soon. Because now we're just focusing on the drawing. So actually, what I'm doing here, I spent a lot of work on this atmosphere, but I want to create a backdrop so that we get a nice colored lighting in that's going to feel really good. We're going to have to go for a multiply layer, which is probably one of the simplest ways you can do lighting. That's because I really want to get the temperature involved. I want this to feel like a very red light source. Okay. So yeah, that's what we're working on right now is just getting this atmosphere in so that it feels really solid when we start to give our boy some render. So people might think that this is Gilliman because he looks, or not Gilliman, Calgar, because he looked pretty similar. But that just a guy I made up because I felt like making an Ultramarine because I love the blue. Some of the blue power armor is just so like classic, you know?
Sorry, what?
Oh, I was just talking to the future comments when this is a VOD.
Oh, fair enough.
Because it's better to fill time than say nothing.
That makes sense. But yeah, right, so other new things that are pretty cool. Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels, has been declared. Okay, so you know the whole river of death magic through the galaxy that cuts one half from the other.
It held down the galaxy in half.
Yeah, so the part that's terrible, Dante has theoretical control over it. Gilliman was like, "Yeah, you're in charge," and Dante's like, "I'm so old."
Who's Dante?
Why? Dante is the chapter master of the Blood Angels and one of the most respected characters.
Oh, okay.
Because the thing is, if anyone's actually going to be able to hold together the half of the galaxy that is pretty much cut off from Gilliman, cut off from reinforcements, and cut off from, well, the Astronomicon, the thing that enables warp travel, like makes warp travel a lot easier. A lot
safer, yeah.
Yeah. It's Dante. I mean, but the problem is he kind of resents that because he really wanted to die at the Battle of Baal. He threw himself into it, hoping that this would be the end and that the visions he keeps seeing of a golden warrior saving the Emperor wasn't him.
Right.
But the implication is that it is. And he will never be able to get away from his obligations. He will, and yeah.
So he's just becoming increasingly informed that he is the one who's going to have to do this.
Yes. There's no one else who can take on this responsibility, and he will never get out.
So we talked
and
about,
it's
sorry, you go. You finish that now.
It's great. And it's great. Anyways, yeah. So we're just saying.
I was going to say, we've done a lot into now what makes it a better story. I want to go back to the worst setting. So like, what is it about this that feels less engaging for you? Is it just the tone to like play in as a setting? Is it just the tone being more hopeful so that you don't get the unique element that this was the only setting that tried to be pure bleakness, or?
That is a big chunk of it. That is a big chunk of it. Like, I have other... Okay, so 40K has, like, every setting has always had issues with just plot armor, issues with just things being pulled out of the hat, things just suddenly changing because the author wanted it that way, and no, we don't need to explain it. Every franchise has that. Every setting has that. That's unavoidable. But 40K used to not be... It used to be a bit better with that.
Yeah.
Like... They would set things up at least. There would be these sort of long-standing plot lines that all sort of came to fruition literally sometimes decades down the line in terms of like real world.
Yeah.
Things didn't spontaneously get better, at least not very often, which means that whenever things got worse, it mattered.
Right, because
a lot of the gravity...
few moments of ground gained.
Yeah. So any world lost to Exterminatus, so basically the final, like the Imperium blowing up its own planets because, or sometimes other planets, but usually their own planets because it's lost. There's nothing we can do. That used to be an unimaginable loss because they can't terraform, at least not well.
Yeah. So there's a limit on how many planets they're going to have access to.
Yeah. So losing habitable worlds matters. Losing Space Marine legions, or chapters, I should say, matters. But now the Primaris are just back, and all these various groups which were pushed to the absolute brink of extinction, they're just at full strength. They're fine. They got better.
Yeah, because Gilliman brought in replacements for all these Space Marine chapters that were about to end.
Like, you had another example of that is the Celestial Lions, who were Imperial Fist successors, and they basically picked a fight with the Inquisition, and they lost. And there was like 3 of them left, and they were slowly trying to rebuild from literally nothing. Then now they're a Primaris chapter at full strength.
Yeah, I think it's such potential, because like, if they do what they used to do, and this is some setup for something, they could have a sudden reveal that there's something immensely wrong with the Primaris, and now all of these legions that have been relying on them are in immense trouble, or maybe even over. But that'd be like when they've made the Primaris such like a big part of their game now as the new basic Space Marine unit, effectively. Like,
yeah,
it feels like a risky business decision for the game to do that. But if it were just a story, it's such a good story setup that they could just pull the rug out and be like, and suddenly there's a problem. Right.
And sorry, just one more quick thing is, so the whole thing of like them losing planets and never being able to reclaim them, that's just over. It's now like a 10-year thing that, because Belisarius Call basically popped out and said, ooh, new planets? I can do that. Because I'm smart.
Which he is. He's a super science man, but also...
But it's just like, yeah, we can make paradise worlds in like 20 years as opposed to 3 millennia. We can now just do this. This is just an established thing now. And I'm like, okay, sure. That kind of cheapens all the worlds lost to like the Tyranids or to Exterminatus or to a dozen other things. We can just fix it.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's that bad, but it does lose a lot of the gravity.
Well, and Warhammer was already a franchise where the scale of it made it hard for things to be big enough to matter. So
Yeah.
making certain things that used to be big enough to matter no longer big enough is always going to feel like a hit for the storytelling, because like, well, the galaxy is so huge, there's not that much you can do that's really bad. So one less thing as an option is significant. Like, that's felt in the narrative.
Mhm. Also, I liked the Imperium as a barely functioning feudal structure.
Mm-hmm.
That was the version of the Imperium that I really enjoyed because it was unique. It had all these different factions that didn't really have a shared command structure, but theoretically were on the same side.
Yeah.
Like you had knight houses, which are giant walking robots with that are essentially a feudal
I
structure.
love that. Next
You had
Warhammer art I do might be a knight, because they are great.
nice. They are. I think they're really funny. Yeah. You had night houses. You had chapters of Space Marines that were basically autonomous. They could do what they wanted, but they were still expected to be on the right side.
Yeah.
And help out to justify all the resources that are given to them.
Yeah.
So then you have like entire worlds that, like, most worlds they're not really part of the Imperium. They just pay their taxes and can occasionally call for help if they really need it. But honestly, the help might not show up anyways.
Yep. I mean,
and so
either because their plan is not valuable enough, because there's not enough military nearby, because messages are sent by dreams through psychics, so sometimes things are just wrong, and sometimes because traveling through hell, which is how they do faster than light travel, means that you show up well after the planet has died.
Yep. And so what you had was a situation where the government itself makes no sense. Well, the government, quote unquote, as much as there is a government.
Yeah.
There's all these different shadow empires within the Imperium. Inquisitors will basically have their own, have their own mini pocket empires. Space Marine chapters will sometimes have their own pocket empires, and everything is kind of disorganized. There's all these different competing groups constantly. This is an empire in decay, and there's all these maggots sort of writhing around doing what they want without really thinking about their host as it rots away.
Yeah.
And now it's Gilliman. And now Gilliman's in charge. He commands everybody. Everybody, well, mostly listens to him, at least whenever they get his attention.
One thing I have found kind of neat, though, that I've heard from stories about Gilliman is this idea that, like, the pain he's in because he didn't quite realize how big these shadow governments were, didn't realize how impossible to negotiate organization when people aren't operating at the same time because of hell making everybody's perception of time different. Realizing how there is a limit to what he can do. And I think if there's anything grimdark about Gilliman coming back, it's that the organized structures of the Imperium were so broken that someone who's preternaturally good at logistics can't fix it. He can only make it better.
Yeah, and no, that's a fair point. And there is a lot of really good stuff in it. It's just I like my grimdark. Everything's going to get worse. The meta plot will always be on the decline. And there's 1,000 different shadow Imperiums that are fighting each other and might not even know they're fighting each other, and everything's a mess. I like that as a setting because I think it was a very good setting for stories where I think one example is a bunch of Imperial guardsmen who are specialists in planes fighting get sent to a massive swamp world. Then they run out of ammunition. They get sent more ammo, but it's all for lasguns that haven't existed for 2,000 years. Like a model of it, so they can't actually use the ammo they've been sent, and they keep getting sent supplies that don't make any sense because everything is just such a mess.
I love that. I do love that. I've heard disagreement to this. I don't remember what side you're on, but I also heard someone pitch that what they want to see is for all of those little splinter factions to basically officially break apart and become independent and be like, no, we are following the true will of the Emperor as the Mechanicus, as our own thing. That way there could be, like, more of a pain that Gilliman is in, and more of a crisis of, like, maybe the Ultramarines are the only group that's still part of the Imperium core proper. quadrants breaking off, like just fracturing it more so that there's more of a state of disarray. And I think I like that because as much as there are problems with that as a narrative, I think it does make things a lot darker and get rid of the edge of things are going to get better to have things fall apart even further. And so far, a lot of the progress since Gilliman's come back, from what I understand, has been mostly positive. Like, at first, Gilliman couldn't leave his armor, and now he can because he just thought about it so hard.
Yeah. He refuses to be reliant on anything. That thing that he's keeping him alive, he just takes it off, and it sucked for a while, but then he got better.
He got better, because he's built different.
I mean, literally, yes, he is built different, so fair enough.
He was built from the ground up by a, maybe God.
God-adjacent entity.
By a God-adjacent entity.
Yeah.
By something that it is understandable to say is a god.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is a lot of different factions that could splinter off, that could start doing their own thing, even if they're not like publicly stating, oh yeah, we are secessionists, but just, you know, imperial orders get lost. Imperial missionaries, or not imperial missionaries, administratum representatives, they get assassinated. That's a thing that happens, you know. Sorry, we just haven't heard your orders for the past 500 years. Yeah. Sorry. That sort of stuff. I could see that, and I think that would be interesting.
I also think... sorry, you go first, and then I'll say.
They are sort of building up to that a little bit, I hope, with the Dark Angels. Because the Dark Angels were always their own thing. They're a Space Marine chapter, but they are functionally a legion. They are so interconnected, and they all sort of follow the same command structure, which is illegal. It is a crime against the Codex Astartes, the thing that manages how Space Marines are supposed to operate.
The thing that Gilliman wrote and doesn't follow fully.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because, I mean, Gilliman will always be a hypocrite because not because he wants to be, but because he thinks he needs to be. Gilliman will always break his own laws whenever they're convenient because he is the ultimate pragmatist.
I do love that in a character. Like, I think that's such a well-written flaw.
But the Dark Angels are basically gathering in Legion strength because the old group of Dark Angels that split from the Emperor, that basically turned against the Emperor during the Horus Heresy, are also gathering in, again, massive numbers. Like, so, and there is actually the Dark Angels just not turning against the Empire, but just saying, no, we don't care about your concerns. We have bigger concerns, and we will never tell you about them. And we're going to do our own thing. And if you try to stop us, we'll kill you.
Yeah.
That's kind of that seems to be what they're leaning towards.
But if it was more broad and there was more splintering and... Yeah. Like, I don't even think full on we're a different thing, just... You can't tell us what to do. We're part of the Imperium, but we are asserting a greater level of independent thought, and there will be now skirmishes and wars, even though we're still saying we're part of the Imperium, like End of Rome type shit, where it's like, no, we're Rome, but we're going to war with Rome because Rome can't tell Rome what to do.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of that. Like the Hexarchy crisis, where 6 of the High Lords, the sort of highest administrative individuals in the Imperium, openly turned on Gilliman, and then were wiped out. Like, there's a little bit of that, but it every time it feels like they're going to go somewhere with that, it's just Gilliman beat them to it. This was all part of his plan. He saw this coming, and there's an assassin right behind them, and also all of their subordinates have already turned against them.
I think if it reaches its limit, though, and the Imperium becoming less cohesive were to become a plot point, why I think that's the version of events that is the downfall and the making things worse again that I want to see is because, first of all, I think it's just interesting and it takes it to a place it hasn't been before. And a friend of ours, when I brought this up, said, well, that just makes it like every other sci-fi. And briefly, I kowtowed and was like, I guess you're right. And then I thought about it and was like, wait a minute, that's not really a thing. I can't actually think of a sci-fi where there's like a bunch of human empires who are all part of once part of the same empire, somewhat working together, but also non-cohesive. Like, I think that is actually very unique.
StarCraft? Actually, I don't know StarCraft lore enough to actually say that.
I mean, StarCraft lore, as far as I'm aware, is basically just how many changes do we need to make before this isn't technically Warhammer anymore?
Yeah, some some parts of the expanded universe of Star Wars.
Some of it, but it's mostly just either Star Wars tends to be in two states: everything is together or nothing is.
No, there's some parts in the expanded universe. Like, look, okay, so my to go completely off topic, Star Wars. My opinion on Star Wars is, if you look at sort of the core stuff, it's the original trilogy is pretty good. The prequel trilogy has its moments, and the sequel trilogy also has its moments, but is overall not that good.
I think
but the expanded universe stuff is really good.
I mean,
a lot of it
is. Universe stuff is really just like, I've heard people describe some of it. Some of it is so absolute garbage, but because it's not high budget productions, the fan base at large just entirely ignores the garbage because you can. It's way easier to ignore a garbage novel than a garbage movie.
I mean, the first 40K novel ever, Draco.
Okay, what happened?
Oh, you don't know about Ian Watson. Ian Watson, sex pest extraordinaire.
Oh, no.
It's got gene steal. It has an assassin, a Calidus assassin who can shapeshift, turn into a gene stealer.
I don't want those in a compromising situation.
Oh, that's like that's like a good chunk of the plot. Oh. It's all about an Inquisitor who's really into gene stealers and wants to fuck.
That is something that if you did it with the utmost finesse could be awesome, and if you slipped up slightly, just becomes bad kink writing.
Okay. And no, here's the thing. Ian Watson, first writer for 40K, first person, not writer for 40K, but first person to write novels for 40K. Yeah. His previous works include, and I shit you not, right? It's been more than enough time. I can cuss, Orgasmatron. It's bad porn writing.
Oh no!
And that is the first 40K novel.
Okay, so...
And it is, beyond the pale. Like, it's so bad.
So this is evidence towards my statement of, like, it's way easier to ignore a trash novel than it is a trash movie.
Yep, and there's good chunks of lore that were written by Ian Watson, and to a large extent, the stance of the fans is that didn't happen, or if it did happen, it's not canon, or it was a weird dream, or
the idea of an Inquisitor abusing their station to, like, make a Calidus assassin, because they have the Inquisitors have absolute authority. So the idea of making a shape-shifting assassin who's supposed to be there to, like, kill political threats with incredible subtlety or infiltrate enemy Xenos and things, like, the idea of making them into a sex toy as an abuse of power is, first of all, potential for some good kink writing if it was not officially published, and second of all, could be a genuinely cool novel concept if you took it very seriously, were really careful with how you wrote it, and, like, just, you'd have to handle it with such finesse. I think it could be really cool.
I mean, I guess the closest thing I could think of to that is Caiaphas Cain with the Inquisitor lady. I don't remember her name, and her sort of leaning on her authority to sleep with the main character, because the main character is very attractive, very charming, and, is... it makes some sense of, like, it's believable, I would say, I guess.
If it was treated well, I think that's a fine thing.
And it's always very subtle. It's always kind of implied sort of stuff. And it is well done, because the Caiaphas Cain novels are really well written. Mm-hmm. They lean more into the sort of comedic and almost whimsical parts of 40K, but they do it in a pretty good way. Because Caiaphas Cain, like, do you know anything about Caiaphas Cain? We are so off topic.
Look, we're talking about, this is an unnamed one. I would love to do this so many times and try to be way more focused about it, where we just talk about one specific topic. This is just ending up generally talking about 40K, and that's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Caiaphas Cain, really great book series, at least the stuff that was by Sandy Mitchell, I think is the original author. They're really good, and Caiaphas Cain, his whole thing is he's a commissar, basically a political officer, and he's supposed to be the big damn hero who shows the men how to fight and how to be brave, and, kills cowards, and is all that sort of very rah, totalitarian political officer.
Yeah, the dream fascist officer.
Yeah. But deep down, he's just an over-the-top coward who just wants to have a nice life.
I like it.
So... he puts on this persona, and he knows he's lying every second of every day, and he almost holds it against himself, but events always conspire to make him a hero, at least in part because he's one of the few like commanding people who's still alive. Because he's a coward, and he's good at being a coward. He's good at knowing when to duck out.
I love that a lot.
So he constantly like saves his own life, and often in saving his own life, he provides like a rallying symbol for the men, or he happens to accidentally retreat behind enemy lines and then blows up one of their generators and saves the day.
Oh my god, I do love it.
Because he's constantly, it's really good. It really does. It's one of the best examples of like, if the big reveal was, no, Tzeentch was messing with him. Tzeentch, the god of fate, the god of dark god of fate.
Fucks with people.
Yeah, the god of plots, schemes, and utter insanity was just messing with him. I'd be like, okay, yeah.
I love Tzeentch as a figure in 40k because the constant with Tzeentch is that the people who come to him for power and then are like, I'm all in, he fucks up and is like, I will destroy you, your life is hell now. And the people who come to him looking for power and are like, I've gotten what I want and now I'm going to fight you, he's like, I like you, and I'm giving this guy what he wants, and I'm gonna stick around and have fun.
Ahriman, Azek Ahriman, Space Marine, is fallen to quote unquote fallen to Tzeentch, is considered Tzeentch's greatest champion, has been spending the past 10,000 years trying to defy Tzeentch and preferably destroy him.
Yep, Tzeentch.
But he is,
Tzeentch loves when you play hard to get.
No, he prefers it when you play impossible to get, because once he gets you, you're trash. He doesn't care.
True. He wants you to come to him, ask for something, and then evade being gotten by him forever, and he's like, that's peak. That's what Tzeentch wants.
Yeah. Because again, Ahriman, another very interesting character. His whole thing is like he's basically a wizard. And back when they started the Emperor, he was a wizard in a society that was like, no, wizards don't exist and magic doesn't exist. And he's like, look, I can use magic counting numbers to undo your bean salad.
Yeah, if magic didn't exist, explain this.
It really is I am using magic right now. You're saying it, the universe makes sense, and I'm just proving it really doesn't, or at least not in a way that you believe at all. And
explain this one, atheists.
Well, it's more like explain this one, atheist. If you could at any moment summon miracles, but the miracles wouldn't make any sense or would be just random.
Yeah.
Like if you could just unmake reality in a random way on command.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really random, like because it's it's psychic powers, quote unquote, but at the same time, the line between psychic power and sorcery and universe doesn't really make any sense. And the Imperium's like,
I love that the Imperium's like, these are psychic powers, and Chaos will do the same thing and be like, that's a sorcerer.
Yeah, but the thing is, not all sorcerers are psychics. Just most of the best ones are. Because you can be a sorcerer without having any innate psychic talent. You can perform the ritual and draw on psychic power. Well, have me draw on sorcery power.
Oh boy.
Because a group of completely mundane human beings can perform a ritual, and the ritual itself will have power because people believe it has power, which is actually something, if we wanted to explain 40k to people who don't know it that well, the warp is the psychic emotional reflection of the real world. If you believe something hard enough, it becomes real in the warp, and if there's enough warp energy, it can influence reality. So doing things in almost dramatic ways, it'd be like if the rule of drama or the rule of cool actually applied in universe. Yeah. Like if you're doing something that shouldn't work, but you believe it'll work and it'll be a better story if it works, there's a chance it'll work.
Yeah. Oh, the warp is so interesting. I feel like we would definitely need to do an entire discussion on the warp to get into it fully, but it's...
Oh, yeah. Honestly, you've heard me and Tristan talk about this.
And your slight disagreements about the warp.
And it's spiraling into hours-long conversations with citations and...
I think it would be very fun to just draw for 2 hours while you guys argue about the warp.
Well, you see, the problem is Tristan will basically be like, "Oh yeah, no, but this like Warhammer," and I'll be like, "Okay, I'm mostly pulling for 40K. You got me. Fine." But it's supposed to be the same metaphysics, damn it.
Oh god. I think I think the metaphysics, from what I understand, are a little bit different. I mean, they have to be because fantasy has the winds of magic, which aren't a thing in 40K.
But they can be on specific planets.
Yeah. Oh god, you're right. It could just be a thing where like the warp gates diffuse warp energy in such a way to create the winds.
Okay, so you have a psychic race, the elves in Warhammer Fantasy,
Yeah.
who firmly believe in the winds of magic and firmly believe in like high magic and firmly believe in all of that, which means that when chaos comes to this planet, guess what form it takes?
Oh,
For the
god,
most
you're
part,
right. Yeah.
it takes the form that the most psychically powerful species expects it to, and then they taught humans that that's how that works.
You're right. Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
The metaphysics could be totally the same and everything would still make sense.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing, is just everything is a lot more limited in scope. Obviously, it's fantasy and Warhammer Fantasy,
Yeah.
whereas 40K tends to be more vague and broad.
I mean,
so, like,
well, Warhammer Fantasy is more limited in scope because it's one planet, whereas 40K is a million worlds.
yeah. So it definitely has the jurisdiction to just say, well, this is a local shaping of. It's like how there are planets where the Chaos Gods are worshipped and they are less violent there because they're believed to be less violent forces.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes up early on with the Thousand Sons, the most psychic of the Emperor's Legion. So this is during the Great Crusade. So way back 30K, not 40K. So 10,000 years before the main plot. They're fighting this planet full of people who are so utterly convinced that psychic powers are just normal and stable. And as long as you keep your head about you, it's fine. And it just is. Like their entire planet is basically psychic. And because they believe that it's a gift from their sun god, their powers are benevolent.
Yep.
They're utterly convinced, like utterly indoctrinated to believe this. And because they believe it so strongly, it kind of is.
That's the warp for you. I mean, it's based on perception, so your perception is going
Yeah.
to influence it entirely. So I'm almost done here. I'm just doing some quick final touches. I don't know if
Nice.
you are watching the stream or if you want to hop on quick and take a look.
I took a couple peeks, but I figured I would just look at the finished project.
Fair enough.
Oh, I can now hear myself, which
Oh. Yeah, if you are going to watch, definitely probably should be muted.
logical. I mean, I almost do want to hear what I actually sound like on stream. Wait, let's see. God, I sound like a dork.
You don't sound like a dork. No one likes the sound of their own voice. Well, some people do.
I do like the ships in the background, by the way.
Thank you. All right, let's blur them up a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm just gonna do one last finishing touch, and then I think I'm done. Which is sparkly stars.
Nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, do you have any other last topics you wanted to bring up, or I know this is mostly just practice for you and getting used to.
Mostly, I am thinking of uploading the VOD, but I probably
Yeah,
am
totally.
going to. But yeah, that's most of what it is. I think we've mostly touched on everything. Just let's, before we go, to give, if this does become a VOD, give the idea of what would be coming next. What's a topic you think you'd really like to discuss about Warhammer at length? Like a specific thing that we could talk about?
Oh no. Okay, so I guess I did kind of bring up like a lot about Gilliman and Godblight. Like I would be happy giving like a 40-minute to an hour lecture on the nature of the divine. Like and I will actually bring in like it's fairly extensive at this point, real world theology readings, because I took a bunch of religious studies classes because just curiosity.
Uh-huh.
And so there's a lot about like the nature of the divine and like the nature of godhood that comes up in 40K. And honestly, one of my favorite scenes from the Plague Wars trilogy is an Eldar, so space elf,
Yeah.
Gilliman, a bunch of librarians, so psychic space marines,
Yeah.
all in a room sipping wine, talking about what the hell is a god? Am I a god? Are you a god? Is humanity a god? Is this elfin a god? The elves have gods, but they're dead, I guess?
I mean, I have said this before. I think elf gods, that's just a story shoved in a robot.
I mean, what is Sheogorak? The Sheogorak? Whatever. The elven god of mischief, comedy, and clowns. Clown goblin.
That's just a story who got out of its robot.
No, true. I do love the clown goblins, the harlequins. Honestly,
it is wild that the three forms of elf in Warhammer 40k are high, dark, and clown.
Yeah. I mean, there's like craft world, which is like strict discipline. You know, we must control ourselves at all times. Then there's the dark elves, the dark eldari, the Drukhari, not Drukhari?
Yeah, they're Drukhari.
Drukhari, yeah, it is
they're
Drukhari, yeah.
in fantasy.
Yeah, it's Druki or Nagarathi in fantasy. Oh man, I really wanted to remember what Vex's term for the Drukhari is. It's something like Ashuriani. Crap. It literally means like the true people of Assyrian, even though Assyrian is gone.
Christ.
And it's this long thing of like, no, this is what we would call ourselves if you actually want to know. Because Vex is surprisingly sociable before he, tortures you to death. And sometimes is part of torturing you to death. Because he's found out that humans are really curious. And so if you give them like half the information to figure out something that they've always wanted to know, and then you kill them, they hate that.
Look, that is a great way to torture humans.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, I could just talk about like the Drukhari or the Dark Eldar. I could talk about like some of the new stuff with the elven lore because I actually rather like it. To my surprise, I mean, the whole joke about me hating elves, which is not entirely a joke.
I'm kind of with you. I find elves are boring in fantasy most of the time, and I think Warhammer, oddly enough, despite it being my least favorite Warhammer, Age of Sigmar has made elves more interesting than any other fantasy world for me.
Oh, come on. Wood elves in Warhammer Fantasy.
They're interesting. They're not my favorite anymore. I love all of the elves in Age of Sigmar. They're so fun. Even the counselors.
Oh, that was a great character. That was a great character for you. But yeah.
Yeah, for now, I think we should call it here. And
all right.
Next time, I think talking about the warp feels like a good place to go. And if Tristan's available, we can have a discussion with a lot of people.
Yeah, that would totally work. Also, just if there's any specific Space Marine Legion that you want to drill down on, I am happy to come in and give my opinions. Space Legion / chapter. I mean, I'm always happy to fanboy over the Iron Warriors, as you know.
I think the Mongols on motorcycles is a great place to start.
Honestly, their origins is pretty damn cool, both on the planet of Shagoras or what was it? Mundus Planus, boring plane, like mundane plane.
All right.
That's the name of their homeworld. It's very funny, but also their origins on Terra as like the crawlers of the scavengers of the Thulian Basin, where it's like, yeah, we survive where no one else can, and we are the ultimate scouts because of that. And that's the cultures that they sort of pull from is nomadic horse warriors and ultimate survivalists.
Okay. All right, for now, Warp will be next, and then at some point talking about that sounds like a good plan.
All right. Yeah, no, totally. See you around.
Well, thanks for being here. That was a ton of fun.
And thanks for having me on the show when it becomes a show.
All right. Have a good one. And
you too.
To all of you who might be watching the VOD when this goes up, goodbye to you too. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.